Hello guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. So guys, today video we are going to learn about state management. So if you don't know about what is the state management, this video for you. This is not only for the juniors and seniors, this is for both of you. You are going to learn about state management, overall state management, right? Before dive into the video, let me introduce myself. Hi, it's me Rahim. I'm a software engineer, JavaScript. Let's begin the video. Okay, why we need this state management? So what is this state management? When to use this state management? So these are the questions we need to ask from ourselves before we learn this state management concept, right? So state management is basically, it's not a big thing, right? So when someone is saying like state management, so can you tell about what is state management? So we get panic about that because we don't know what is this state management. Suppose if you are not work with state management, right? So state management is basically a represent of the objects and values, right? So basically if you are working with single page applications, so if you don't know about single page application, there is a 2-3 videos I have created. What is that single page application? If you don't know about what is a single page application, please check out that videos, right? State management, so basically it's a representation of your objects and the values, right? So we are keeping somewhere in global that particular objects and values, and based on that we are taking that values and updating the values. That is how we are normally doing. This is basically high level of what is state is basically, right? So state management, when you come to state management, why we need this state management? So basically we don't need to introduce state management in every applications, but some of the application you must need to introduce, because example, like if you are using a library called React, it is one-way data binding. So in this case you definitely need to go with context API or something else like Redux or something that is basically state management library. So you need to introduce that kind of a thing. So basically introducing state management is basically not necessary for small application, but if you are basically if you are developing a large scale applications, some of the data get used over and over again in the different component, then you must need to introduce this state management pattern. But guys, you must need to aware on this. Introducing a state management will create a complexity of the application. So this is basically very complex. If someone is working like junior members or someone is in the team working with you, but you are an experienced developer, you can manage it somehow, right? But the people who are basically juniors can't manage or can't understand the pattern. So this will basically reduce the productivity and basically increasing the bugs of this application, because they don't know what is this state management is, right? So that's the reason. If they don't know about this pattern, ideally there's a lot of chance to mess up our application, right? So this is the reason I'm saying, if you really want to introduce this state management, then you can introduce. If it is goes large, if it is a large application, or that same data get reused somewhere in the different component, then you must need to go with a state management approach, right? Okay, so when to use, you know that now, when to use this state management and what is this state management, and let's talk about the benefit of this state management. Okay, so introducing a state management, there's several benefit of introducing this, right? One is basically we can maintain everything globally, easy to test, and if you're writing a unit test for the application, so that is very easy. You don't need to mock anything. You can use this state management and you can write the unit test for that. So very easy, right? And other one is basically the dev tools. Dev tools are really cool. You can debug very easily. So basically it is a time traveling debugging, right? So very easy. You can install one of the extension, right? So that will get capture each and every actions you are triggering. That will shows the updated one, the latest values, and the things, then you can revert it or you can update it, you can restore that previous value. So those kind of things are possibly we can do with uh, state management if you introduce a state management. And also guys, if you are implementing something like redo and undo implementations or futures, don't worry, state management has these all futures. You can undo, redo, anything you can do with state management if you are introduce the state management in your application, right? So that's the thing guys. So it is really cool and basically very easy sometimes. For the experienced developers this is easy, but for the juniors I would say you must need to know about the pattern. Basically you don't need to know about how these codes work and etc, but you must need to aware about the pattern of the concept and the pattern. So if you know this pattern, you can definitely you can work with this state management pattern, right? State management applications, right? So you know that so basically if you take these single page application, there's a lot of frameworks and libraries out there. For example, we have Angular, right? So Angular is basically one of the application. So it has basically two-way data bindings and services. Definitely we don't need to introduce this state management into Angular, because you know what, we can handle it somehow, right? But if you take other hand, if you take this React is a basically a library. So if you take that library, that doesn't have that ability. So basically if you want to pass the data between the component to component, ideally what you need to do is either you need to do prop drilling, or you need to use this context API, right? So this is basically a kind of a, so context API is okay, I'm saying okay for the small application, but for the large applications I would say introducing state management is basically very helpful here. But for the Angular I'm not thinking, because I have worked with several application and complex applications and very large applications, but I didn't say that people are introduced or architects are introduced the state management in the applications, right? So state management, introducing a state management is basically making the application complex, basically reducing the productivity of the application. So that's the reason I'm saying think twice before you introducing this state management. Suppose if you are introducing this state management, I would say pick the easiest one. So if you let's say if you are working on an Angular project, right? So Angular project, it's a framework. So you are going to introduce this state management. So what kind of a state management? If you take these state management libraries, there's 2-3 libraries, popular libraries are there. One is basically NGXS and other one is basically NGRX, right? And also, of course, yes, you can introduce this Redux library also, right? But I would say if you go to NGRX, there's a lot of boilerplates are there, right? So very difficult. Sometimes the juniors will get confused, right? Sometimes the seniors also sometimes get confused, right? Because of the architectures and all, some of them basically get confused, right? So if you're picking a kind of a library, you must need to aware about the boilerplate. If some libraries has not a lot of boilerplate, but the minimal boilerplate, then you must need to pick that particular library. So I would say if you are working on Angular, better, I will recommend that better to go with the NGXS. That is very easy. I tried that a couple of years back. I think it's 2020, I guess. Maybe you can check out my GitHub repository. You can find that information. I mean, you can find that small application I have created with the Angular. I am using that NGXS there, right? So you can take as example if you like to refer that code, right? On the other hand, if you come to React, you can use that Redux library, or you can go with the simple small state management library called Akita or something. Yeah, I'm not remember exactly. That's a small thing. I will put in the description, I mean the video description. You can check out that library if you like, right? Right now, planning to explain the concept then very easy you to grab this concept how this is work, right? But I'm not going to write the code here, because in outside you can see lot of tutorials out there and they are writing a code and showing how this is work. But I will give you a good picture of this state management, right? So what is the core concept of this state management? All these things I will share through this video, right? And for this one I have created a small diagram. Let me show you that diagram. And you can see that this is basically a small diagram I come up with. I will explain you one by one the core concept of this state management or Redux pattern, right? So this is very important. If you grab this concept, the rest of the things are nothing to you, right? You can work on any kind of Redux libraries, because the concept is same to everything, but the code is bit different. Don't worry, but if you grab the concept, that's all we really need to work on the project, right? Okay, now you can see here we have action, dispatch and reducer and store, right? So a core concept, basically if you are working on a Redux, there's a three kind of thing you must aware. One is basically action, second is basically reducer, third one is basically store. Okay, so store is basically nothing, right? So that is basically a place where we have kept our state and reducer. Reducer is basically nothing, it is just a pure function. So basically consider that as a function. The reducer is basically a function. Store is basically the place where we keep these functions and the initial state of this application, right? So initial state mean, basically I already told you that. So let's say if you have a component called navbar, right, or a button, right? So that button, when you click the button, you need to keep one of the variable to increase the time. I mean, each and every click, if you want to increment that number, so ideally what you need to do is inside that component, forget about the navbar, right? So you are in a component, you have a button in that component UI, right? So each and every click the number will get increment, right? So in this time, so normally if you are implementing this kind of a small feature, what you are doing is you are declaring a variable inside that particular component, and each and every click you are increment that particular number, right? So this is what you are doing. So this is basically you are written in the component level state, but you need to keep that state on global level. So that's the reason where the store is come to the picture, right? So in the store you can see that we can include that initial state, and the reducer is basically a function, right? So now we have this action, right? So once user click that button, so we have action to increment, right? So we are getting that actions from action file. So action file is basically, it is nothing but just a constant value we keep in that particular file, that then each and every changes we know that what is the changes is, or what is the actions is happened, right? So dispatch is something basically each and every clicks we are passing that particular actions item with the payload to the particular dispatch, so that will update the reducer will basically has this pure function that has that particular statement to check that particular action. If that action is true, then what happen is ideally that particular function get called, right? So after that, based on the reducer function, the reducer will basically responsible to update the store and return a new copy of the particular state, right? So basically we are not touching the original value of that particular store. Instead of that, we are just updating and returning a new state, right? So basically you must need to know that. So if you are introducing a state management, ideally it should be a immutable. So we call that immutable, the name called immutable. So basically this is a technical term, right? So but to be honest guys, it's not to scare that. The word is bit scary, but the thing is it's not scary, right? Immutable mean if you have any object or array or any value, you cannot touch that original value of the object instead of that you need to update and return a new value, right? So the rule is basically do not touch the original object, keep it as it is, but update it and return a new value, right? So that is why we call that as a immutable. So stores are immutable, states are immutable, you cannot touch the original code. Instead of that you need to return the new value, right? So this is the thing, right? And also, so how we get update the particular UI, right? So normally if you search it on the internet, you cannot find that how these updates are happening, right? So updates are happening very difficult, right? So that's the reason I come up with the diagram this as this selector, right? This selector is basically used to retrieve the particular value from the state or store, right? Store. So that's the reason getting that particular selector variable and shows in the UI. So each and every actions, it is go to dispatch, actions, reducer and update the store and sync with the UI. So that is the process of this state management. Now let's see one by one. So here we have constant. I have added some of the screenshot here. You can see this is what our constants is. Basically this is an action. This is just a small high level view of this code, but when the things get improved, right? So then the complexity of the code will also get increased, but at the moment for a simply explain purpose I keep it as it is. So here you can see in action we have this increment and decrement. So this is basically a constant value, right? Just a constant, this is not going to change, right? So basically these are basically string values like increment and decrement. So let's say if you want to add a new user to the new user as action, you can define one of the constant and you can put that variable, declare that variable as a add user, and you can mention that add user string in that particular as a value. Now you can see that we have a dispatch here, right? Each and every click you can see that when the button is get clicked, the increment, assume that increment is the method get called. So here what we are doing is we are just dispatching that. So we have a type and the other one is basically payload or body or whatever you can define, it is doesn't matter, right? So increment, which is importing from action file, right? So here is the place where that our actions are defined. So we defining the type is basically increment. So we define the type as increment and the payload we are passing increment by 1. That is basically value, right? Now we are dispatching, right? So once we dispatch, now we have the reducer. This reducer has, so first basically you need to know that store, and store is basically the file name, right? The reducer is basically a function, right? So function, this function you can see that counter reducer, right? Counter reducer is expecting two kind of argument. One is basically state, second one is basically action, right? In the action, you can see that initial state is defined, the value is 0, right? Now you know that the state is there and the action is there. Now if you take this dispatch, right? So in the dispatch we are passing type and the payload. Type is basically increment. So in here we have the counter reducer function. We have the switch statement that is checking whether the type is basically increment or decrement, right? If it is increment, so we are passing increment. So what happen is whatever the value or whatever the variables and properties, whatever the properties are available, that particular initial state, taking that all the state and updating the value. So here you can see this is basically spread operator. After that, altering this value to state value plus action payload increment by. So in the action we have a payload, right? We have a payload and increment by. So here you can see action, we have a payload and increment by is another property. So here we are calling that argument and dot payload dot increment by. So basically increment these existing state value, the previous state value and the current increment by value, then add together and define that value and return the new state. See, because we can update it directly, but the thing is we are breaking the rules, right? So that's the reason you must need to return a new copy of that particular state, right? So this is the thing. So I believe you understand that clearly, so how this is working, right? So I believe this is very helpful video, because now you know that the concept. This is very simple example I come up with. The based on the application or based on the libraries we are using, the complexity will be different, right? So keep that in mind. I believe you guys understood that concept I have explained here, and I believe this is very useful video, because I come up with this video because this is very important topic, because most of the people get confused sometimes when you come to migrations from one-to-one applications. Let's say for example .NET to JavaScript or React. So sometimes you become it's become a problematic. So most of the time, you know that nowadays very the Gen AI stuffs are very trending, right? So most of the companies are building their own solutions and own AI models, right? So based on that, they are trying to migrate applications, right? So these times, if you don't know about these concept and all, you mess up your application, right? So that is the reason I'm creating this video. This will be save you from that kind of a problem. I believe this is basically very helpful. If you are a person, if you are working in industry, you must need to know about this particular concept. I hope you guys enjoy this video, and also don't forget to like our video and don't forget to subscribe our YouTube channel. Then guys, have a great day. I will catch you on new video. Bye.